A brief introduction. My name's Gav Orman. I am a registered environmental engineer and I am the Director of Compliance Technologies here with Toolkit. Today, we're going to discuss the continuous improvement process and in particular, how that can be applied to a TRI reporting post-mortem situation where instead of looking at, yay, we finished our report, now let's look into next year's and see how we can improve that process and system. For those that don't know, Toolkit is a customizable and active compliance management software suite. And we also do EHS compliance consulting with our ultimate goal and our mission to be making day-to-day EHS compliance both active and efficient for what are often small teams trying to get all of this work together. The tool that we offer that's most relevant to today's discussion is always going to be our TRI Toolkit, which is our guided end-to-end EPA TRI reporting and submittal tool. Our built-in logic reduces time, errors, and risk associated with this complex report, and it helps you create defensible and audit-ready records. However, this is not the only tool that we offer. We also have our compliance tool, which is a broad environmental management system. We do determination tool, which is our applicability determinations. And we also have the emissions tool, which centralizes your emissions data and actually integrates with our TRI tool for collaboration on making sure that your reports match up between emissions and TRI. But for today, what we're going to talk about is the continuous improvement process and some methods on how to do that. And so I'll start by just explaining what the process is. We'll look at some different questions that might help you review your TRI report that you just submitted and your future TRI reports that you will submit. And then I'm going to talk about 3 different analysis tools that are most commonly seen in the safety and operations side of things, but can also be applied to environmental programs as well. So what is a continuous improvement process? What it comes down to is that a correct report or an accurate outcome isn't the same as a correct or efficient process. So if you had an error pop up in this year's reporting and you fixed it, that's great. But a fix that only corrects a single year's number doesn't ease any future reporting struggles. If you don't fix the process or the root cause of that error, you're going to make it next year, the year after, maybe 5, 10 years from now. When you have a regulator or an auditor show up at your site, it might seem like they're nitpicking small violations, but what they're really doing is looking for evidence of a repeated systemic issue. So if they show up to your site once and you have one late TRI report, that's not a huge deal. You can explain that away. You can say, yeah, we're not going to do it again. But it's harder to say it was a one-time mistake, we won't do it again if you've had 10 late TRI reports. And so that's what they're really looking for, is that kind of systemic repeated violation. And the same root cause tools that we use in safety programs and in quality assurance programs can be applied to environmental reporting and environmental management. I just don't see them applied as often, which is what inspired this webinar. Continuous improvement is ultimately based on this plan, do, check, act model, or the PDCA. If you're in a manufacturing role, this is probably pretty familiar to you. The first step is always to set up your process. So you say, we're going to assess our thresholds for TRI like this, and this is where we're going to collect our data, and here's how we're going to calculate our numbers. That's our game plan. The doing is actually gathering and submitting the report per your plan. What's really, really important to do is then check yourself. Did our process work well? Did we have to change anything in our process to fix errors? What went wrong? what didn't go wrong? Those are all questions to ask that indicate I can change something in my process to make my program stronger in the future. What people often forget to do is they'll have that conversation, or maybe they'll think about it internally, and then they forget to update the process. And so once you've had that kind of check in that analysis, go ahead and act by updating the process in the system and then trying it again next year. Environmental programs aren't built in a day, they're built over years and years of consistent, continuous improvement efforts. So, how do we apply this to TRI reporting in particular? And I want to start by just thinking about some questions we can ask to review our TRI reporting process. How to start the conversation? These are more surface level questions that are related to the actual outcome. So were we able to easily identify our threshold exceedances? Did we confirm that we assessed all chemicals used on site? Do we know what all of our byproducts are? Were we able to comprehensively calculate our releases? Did we confirm that operations were the same as the previous year? Do we think there are any gaps in our release or threshold calculations? Do our TRI numbers match our other reporting obligations, such as our air emission inventory? So these are questions that might be easier to ask. They're more yes or no's, but they're not diving deeper into what the root cause might be for any issues associated with this, right? So were we able to easily identify our threshold exceedances? Maybe the answer is no. And that question can open the door to that conversation, but it's not going to finish the conversation. So, how do we further this and to start talking about the process itself and start pushing towards that improvement aspect for the program? We're going to ask, is usage and release data captured at the source? Are we estimating it via calculations? So now we're starting to dive into, where are we getting that information from? Is that the right place to be getting info? Are we doing it consistently? Who owns each part of the process, whether that's collecting data, calculating thresholds, or calculating releases? Does that person fully understand the responsibilities associated with that role? So ownership of a process is very important to actually completing an outcome. If the person calculating the thresholds isn't aware that they need to check with procurement about potential new products, you're going to find gaps in your threshold analysis. If the person calculating releases doesn't know that they need to be checking with operations for any changed operations, you're going to have gaps in your release calculations. And so really establishing who's doing what, when things need to get done, and what each task fully represents is important to getting that final end goal completed. Did we identify gaps in our report this year? How do we improve our process to eliminate those gaps entirely? It can be easy to point at a gap or an issue and say, that's a gap, or man, that's going to be rough next year. It was rough this year. But it's harder to ask, how do we fix it? And more importantly, who's going to lead fixing the process to eliminate that gap? Often that includes taking on more work. We're already stretched thin in EHS. So who's going to take the initiative to do the work now to make your work easier next year? And are there better methods for doing this report? Just because your department or your company has done a report a specific way for the last 10 years does not mean that that is the right way to be doing the report. Sometimes it is worth the effort to switch systems and switch methods and have kind of a rough go of a report for 1 year to ensure that moving forward, you're using the correct system that works for your company. So to talk about root cause analyses, the first one I want to talk about is the 5 why analysis. This is one of my favorite ones to do. In this analysis, what you need to do is start by selecting a failure or a pain point, and you just ask yourself why repeatedly until you reach a cause or issue that you can actually tangibly fix. This works really well for a well-defined problem. If you want to find a fast, low-cost starting point, you can just keep asking why until you drill down into something that's easy to fix. And it's great for situations where you might have one clear chain of causes, so you had an actual domino effect happen. So this looks like I have a problem. Why did that problem occur? Why did that occur? Why, until you ultimately have a root cause. For an applied example of this, I took a situation where a facility has missed a threshold exceedance. So they didn't report on a chemical that they should have. The first question to ask is, why wasn't the threshold exceedance identified? Well, we missed a contributing activity to the threshold, and so we didn't capture that amount of usage. Why did we miss a contributing activity? We changed products last year and we forgot to update our inventory list. Why wasn't the inventory list updated? We keep our TRI inventory logs separate from our production and operations logs. Well, why are the logs kept separate? Nothing prompted data sharing across business units. They were all just doing their own tasks within their own businesses. And why isn't there a prompt to share key data across business units? The threshold tracking for TRI was never built into the operations workflow, and vice versa. The team doing TRI never built in checking with operations into their workflow. And so the result of that analysis is that our root cause is that threshold tracking for TRI isn't integrated with the daily material receiving, and so exceedances are missed when products may change on the floor without notice to the EHS team, or the EHS team wasn't checking with the actual people using the chemicals. So what might the solution be? The solution might be to restructure workflows to ensure that the EHS team is making an active effort to collaborate with procurement for updated product information. And so the solutions don't need to be complex, but they need to move you in the right direction. The goal of continuous improvement in these root cause analyses is to find a problem, fix a problem, do it a little better next year. The Fishbone analysis maps potential causes across categories, which all branch into a single effect. So whereas the 5 why looks at a single problem and a single root cause, the Fishbone analysis, in my opinion, is a more holistic look at problems that may lead to a certain effect. These are best for problems that have several contributing factors, typically environmental, machine-related, man-related, process or methods, materials or available resources, and then just tools of measurement. You can even split it into different business units. It has a lot of flexibility for what those categories are. But as we all know, most problems have several contributing factors. So I like the Fishbone analysis for that reason. It's great to do these in team brainstorming sessions. It lets everyone feel like they have a voice in identifying the problems and identifying fixes for those problems. And it also helps you avoid fixating on the first potential cause you find. Often, the first cause you find for an error might not be the best one to fix. It might not have the greatest impact. So using our applied example of a missed threshold exceedance, this is what a potential fishbone diagram might look like. In the people category, what I said is that no one seems to own threshold tracking as an ongoing task. And so we had a gap in ownership over the system. For data and systems, they were keeping 2 separate inventories. So procurement and operations had one inventory and EHS had a different inventory that was out of date. For management, the threshold review for TRI is only done once a year, and it's done in EHS, which can unfortunately become a bit of an isolated business unit, versus Procurement has an up-to-date list of chemicals on site at any given moment because they're the ones moving the money around to buy those chemicals. For the process, usage is collected separately without collaboration. And for materials, EHS isn't made aware when products change on the floor. And so there's just a gap in knowledge. The ultimate effect of all of these contributing factors is that a threshold was exceeded for, but the team was unaware of that exceedance until after the report was filed. And so what you would do after this is you would take all of these different potential contributing causes and you would pick one or two to solve. Some of these overlap, such as the separate inventories and the usage being collected separately. You can assign someone to this task to lead it, et cetera, et cetera. But it gives you some different pathways to explore. Now, fault trees are the last one I want to highlight. I tend to use fault trees as a pre-planning tool rather than a post-mortem tool, but they can be used either way. The fault tree starts with an undesired top event, and then you work backwards through logical and or situations to find the combination of failures that might cause it. So logically, it works very well as a pre-planning tool because you go, okay, my worst case event is that someone gets hurt on the floor or we submit the report late. And then you can kind of figure out what would contribute to that worst case event so that you can prevent it before it occurs. These fault trees are best for exploring complex or critical failure points. They are great for problems where several conditions may combine together to create the perfect storm of issues. And it makes logic between causes explicitly known because you're tracking the exact cause to the effect. So for our applied example, here's what a threshold exceedance being missed looks like in a fault tree. So if we follow this, the top event is this threshold exceedance is missed. Well, that was either due to usage not being properly tracked, or it was due to the inventory not being updated. If it was due to the usage not being properly tracked, that comes from business units using different inventories and no reviews being done between units. So these are the ultimate kind of starting points that lead to the threshold exceedance being missed. In our other scenario, if an inventory wasn't updated, that could be due to EHS being unaware of changes in product types, and it could be due to inventory isn't reviewed on a frequent basis by the EHS team. So that's just another tool in your toolbox that you can use for root cause analyses. 3 things to take from this to bring back to your team. Treat every missed deadline or filing error as a process signal, not a one-off situation. Maybe you just made a calculation error this year. Maybe you could redesign your spreadsheet or your reporting system to not have that error in it in the first place. If you missed a deadline this year, maybe you need to start your TRI reporting process sooner than you did. And so those should be process signals to re-review your process rather than just saying, we fixed it, we're fine. Match the problem solving tool to the problem. So whether you had a simple mistake that you can fix with a 5 why analysis, whether you have kind of a larger systemic issue that has several contributing factors, or if you're looking at kind of a special soup of failure conditions leading to a worst case scenario. You want to choose the tool that'll work for you and for your team. And root cause analysis pays off if you're frequently engaging with the continuous improvement loop on the process itself. If you're frequently doing these analyses and improving your processes, you're actually going to curate a team of people that is looking to improve the process. And as a result, you'll end up with a better and more stable environmental program overall. And so that is all I have to say on the TRI post-mortem process at this time. Um, this is my contact information. I'm always happy to help teams talk through TRI issues, TRI concerns, or just bounce some ideas around for TRI reporting process improvements. If you have any questions or want to run anything by me now, we do have a few minutes available to do so. So I will stick on for